All right, Aaron, let's talk Michigan Wolverines football again. It's good to talk to you since the season began.
Yeah, it's good to be here. They're off to a 7-0 start, just like last year. And ironically enough, they have another showdown with in-state rival Michigan State on Saturday.
Yeah, I saw the big point spread again, and I'm like, come on, do we really need to have these big point spreads with Michigan State? I mean, hasn't anybody learned what it is about this rivalry? It doesn't matter how good or bad Michigan State is; they always seem to give Michigan a hard time.
Yeah, in fact, 2020, Michigan entered that game, I think, as a 20 or 21 point favorite, just like this Saturday. And sure enough, they went lost, and it was a home game, just like Saturday. So you're right. Michigan State always seems to come ready to play, regardless how good or bad they're playing, and vice versa too. I mean, these two teams, they don't like each other. They come prepared for one another, and it should be at the very least, it should be a competitive game.
Yeah, just looking here. Looks like that was the only loss Michigan's had against Michigan. Actually, the weird thing is that the two losses that they've had against Michigan State since 2016, 2017. Matter of fact, yeah, we can go 3 losses since 2015. We're at home.
It's weird. It almost seems like the road team plays better, and sometimes in this case, at least recent memory, wins the game. It's wild.
Yeah. So beware, especially off the bye. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's always something to keep in mind. And Michigan State is kind of feeling better because before the Wisconsin win, they really had nothing going for them at all. I know they had a lot of injuries early on in the season, so there's that. What do you see, though? What are you hearing from Michigan State as far as why there's such a big difference between this year's team and last year's team?
Well, beginning of the year, the one thing I kept hearing was their offensive line just wasn't nearly as good as it was last year. So right away, the assumption was the run game wasn't going to be as strong as what they had last year.
Well,
And
Kenneth Walker, yeah.
right, that's a big reason too. Obviously, Kenneth Walker was a big reason why they're so successful. But so I think they've had to lean on the running game or the passing game a little bit more. And you've seen, I think, in a way, Peyton Thorne, while good, I think he's in a way kind of limited too.
Yeah.
So I think you've seen some teams scheme to take away the passing game from Michigan State, and then the flip side, Michigan State's defense. It seems like it just really hasn't gotten much better than it was last year. And last year it was atrocious. It seems like the last game against Wisconsin, schematically, they did some things differently. I haven't had a ton of time to look at the tape on before and after, but they certainly, they did a decent job with Wisconsin. Now, it's obviously Wisconsin. They've had their own troubles and the like.
Yes, that's true.
But they sounds like they're starting to get it together. I certainly think Michigan State's defensive coordinator, Scotty Hazelton, is on the chopping block. I think he realizes, his job is on the line here if they don't turn it around quickly. So I think they've done some things schematically to maybe play some guys differently to maximize their value. But that's one of the reasons. I mean, they came in. Michigan State wasn't expected to be an 11-win team just like they were last year. I think I had them before the season started. I had them finishing, I think, 4th in the East. It was right around what most folks did. I think we were expecting maybe an 8-4 year. Certainly not like this. I mean, they looked fine starting the year, but then since Big Ten play, it's kind of nosedived since.
Yeah, throw everything you said and add on those injuries because they had, like
Right.
you just said, they had a really ton of injuries early on. 105th in the nation right now in defense, 80th against the run, and we know that's what Michigan's all about. Top 10 in the nation with their run offense, and I was talking on one of the other shows about how it's not just about all Blake Corum, and that. I feel very confident Donovan Edwards is going to have a nice long pro career. He's got that pass catching ability that the NFL teams covet from the backfield, and he can run the football as well. So if you need him to be a number one at the next level, I think he could do that because of his ability on third downs and in passing situations. And look, we all know J.J. McCarthy offers a different element. And they're going to be a much more dangerous offense. Let's just say whether they play Ohio State and they're still undefeated, or let's just say, because we'll talk before that, but let's say they go to the playoffs and I still think they're going to be more dangerous offensively than last year. But in my opinion, I think until at some point they start passing the football more effectively, I don't think they're going to be able to beat the big teams, because that to me is the whole reason why, part of the reason why JJ McCarthy makes more sense. Not just because you got to also worry about his running ability. Yeah, that's one thing. But JJ is a more dynamic downfield passer. And I know statistically things have gone awry since the first couple of weeks. Fine. But you have to fix it. You've got to keep having him throw downfield as often as possible, especially and I understand they're trying to win games first, but at some point you have to see that. And I think until you see them passing the football and giving teams different looks in the passing game and scaring them in the passing game, I don't think you're going to beat the big teams.
Yeah, and I think there's some Michigan fans that certainly agree with that. It's funny because J.J. McCarthy, I think, as of today, this week, leads the nation in completion percentage. So I think the ones he's missing are those deep balls, because they've tried. He hasn't been able to connect on too many of them. So I think Michigan sees that, and they almost feel, automatically going back to the run game. It's kind of their bread and butter. It's something they've leaned on for a long time. Jim Harbaugh likes doing. But you're right. I think at some point they're going to have to throw the football. I think for them, they haven't really had to just yet.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, right? Like when they are forced to do that, how are they going to look? Now, yeah, you're right. I think J.J. McCarthy gives Michigan a different dimension. I think we talked about this before the season started, but like him and Cade McNamara, varied widely in terms of their skill set. Cade was more that pocket passer, game manager, could get them on assignment, but his skill set wasn't prone to throwing down the field all the time. He didn't have the strongest arm in the world. You throw in J.J. McCarthy now, and he's got that arm.
Yeah.
He can do that.
They're not using it yet, though.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't even know that it's J.J. McCarthy that's actually playing. You would think, oh, that's K. McNamara. He's at 77%. He's managing the game well. But that's not what we need. We need more dynamic production in the passing game. So sooner or later, that has to step up.
I think it will at some point, but I think it's weird because Michigan has technically changed offensive coordinators this year.
Yes.
And they have different guys calling plays, but this is still Jim Harbaugh's way of doing things. He still wants to win the trenches, win the line of scrimmage, run the football. And I think, as I said, until they're forced to do otherwise, they're going to keep doing it. And I don't see a scenario right now. I thought maybe we would have seen a little bit more against Iowa, and they tried to. But then as the game wore on, Michigan clearly had the edge there, so they didn't feel like they had to.
Yeah, that's the thing. So yes, they didn't get careless. They were they were conservative. I get it. Yeah.
So it's weird. Like maybe Illinois is next. If not, I mean, it could be up until Ohio State where they might have to throw the ball. And look, they beat Ohio State last year largely on the ground. On
the ground again, yeah.
So I don't know.
I know.
Think they think their best shot is winning the line of scrimmage and running the football and winning the ground game. And we'll see. Yeah. I think they're content doing that as long as they can until someone stops.
Yeah, it's almost like it's just okay. Is that going to be? All right, you beat Ohio State again, and you go back to the playoffs, because I just don't see how he's going to believe that he'll be able to go up against like an SEC defense and can just overpower the line of scrimmage in the run game. It's just not going to happen.
No, I agree. And we saw that against Georgia last year. Michigan just didn't have the horses to do it. Now, I will say with regards to the passing game, I think they've got more weapons.
Agreed. Yes.
I think they've utilized Roman Wilson particularly well in the screen game and the slot. Luke Schoonmaker, the tight end, has come along very well. You've got Ronnie Bell back.
Ronnie Bell's back.
Last year. Cornelius Johnson's hit or miss, but they've got multiple weapons to throw the ball to. So I think they're certainly equipped to throw the ball more. I want to say they're going to do it at some point. I just don't know. Don't know when.
I know. Again, if they get to the playoffs, it's probably when. They'll be forced to. And then we'll just have to sit there and hope that it works. But they won't get a second chance. That's the thing. I tell you right now, when I look at this receiving core, that's the thing that just, you say to yourself, but there's weapons. And I can't imagine in this day and age of transfers that these kids are going to hang around for this. Why would they? I wouldn't. I'd be like, hey, I'm getting like 10 receptions a year at Michigan. I could get 50 if I go to another Power 5 school with a passing game. That's how talented I am. That's what I would. If I'm Andrell Anthony, that's what I'm saying.
That it's a good point. And I actually asked Roman Wilson that very question like a week ago. I flat out asked him, like, as a receiver, are you okay with being on a team where you're running the ball X number of times a game like they are? And that it seems like at least the cumulative response at this point is they're fine because they're winning.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I will say, after the Penn State game, J.J. McCarthy spoke to the media, and I thought he had some real illuminating comments. Someone asked a similar question to him, and he seemed convinced that, and he said this, he's like, playing in an air raid system doesn't win national championships. Like, it's fun and it would be great for stats, but we're not winning. So JJ has learned that you don't need to throw the ball X number of times to win. He seems fine doing it. I was talking with someone about this the other day, but I think in a way Jim Harbaugh has found the perfect quarterback in JJ McCarthy, because with the way they play offense, you're not going to get too many 5-star kids who sling the ball around wanting to come to Michigan because they're not doing it.
That's true.
Whereas JJ was that 5-star kid. He could be that guy, yet he's perfectly fine playing within Jim Harbaugh's system, at least for now, and I don't see it changing.
Yep.
So in a way, I think Jim's found the perfect quarterback. I think maybe gradually over time they use him more. Maybe next year's the year when they feel like they can sling it around a little bit more. But as of now, I mean, they're winning games and they're doing it how the boss wants it to, So I don't know. It is a fascinating conundrum. I will say that.
And the thing is I understand where Coach is coming from, because I defended him last season and all season so hard because I could see the transition and everything was working, because he had basically given up on the folly of trying to be this modern spread team. It just wasn't working. That's not Jim Harbaugh. It's about running the ball, line of scrimmage, limited mistakes, good defense, really good defense, special teams, all that kind of stuff. That's what we've seen out of Jim Harbaugh in his career. So I understand that, and I don't think that should go away. The only thing I'm saying is when you have the weapons now, they're there, use them. Just use them, because they're not going to be there a lot. So use them while you have them and take advantage. And first things first, you got to get over Ohio State. And it doesn't, because really at this point, it would be interesting because Michigan made the playoffs last year, it would be interesting if Michigan, let's just say they lose before Ohio State and they beat Ohio State. I think it's quite possible they still go to the playoffs.
Yeah, I certainly would think it's legitimate. I think Michigan, right now, they're certainly a top 5 team. If they lose, they probably wouldn't drop out of the top 10. I don't see Ohio State losing anytime soon.
No.
If it would be that Michigan game at the end of the year. It's certainly possible. And we bounced around the idea, what if Ohio State and Michigan are both unbeaten going into that final game in Columbus, and it's a close game like 2016 where it goes to overtime, and you potentially could get 2 Big Ten teams in the playoffs.
Hey, why not? The SEC does it all the time.
Right. So it's hard to say now because there's so much left of the season. But the way Michigan's playing, the way Ohio State is playing, I think Michigan has proven they belong there. I think folks, I don't say they looked at them as a fluke last year, but for so long we've been talking about Michigan not being up to the standards of the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the like. And they kind of proved everyone wrong last year. So I think they're, in a way, kind of playing with house money. And I think if they're in that position at the end of the year and they play well against Ohio State and win or lose, it's possible.
Possibly, yeah.
They certainly, ideally, would want to win that game, because it would certainly basically be an automatic at that point. But they're playing good football. I mean, there's been no doubt about it. I mean, they're 19-2 since the end of the 2020 season. I mean, this has been a total turnaround for Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. I remember at the end of the 2020 season, people were calling for his head. There was a growing frustration here in Ann Arbor for Jim Harbaugh.
That's right.
I mean, he'd won games, but he hadn't gotten them to the pinnacle.
Yep.
And it's crazy how quickly things change in a matter of, 20 months?
Yeah, and you can kind of see why he's probably being stubborn about what worked last year. And why mess with it?
It's what he's always done.
Yeah.
So it's for anyone. You go back to what you're comfortable doing, no matter what profession you're in.
Yeah. And I get it. Now on how has the offensive line been compared to last year? Because it does seem like, it took a little while, especially with the right tackle spot, but it seems like it's really, especially after the Penn State game, it's really started to gel.
Yeah, it took some time. There's a lot of shuffling early in the year. There were so many guys in and out with injuries, especially that left side. The right side was pretty stable up until a week ago or a couple weeks ago when Trente Jones, right tackle, went out. But the left side was dealing with left tackle Ryan Hayes missed the first game due to injury. They were without the left guard for a few games. They've had to shuffle guys in and out. So up until the Penn State game, I was ready to say the offensive line wasn't as good as it was last year, but then they kind of all came together, missing the right tackle against Penn State, and you saw what that offensive or that rushing performance they put on. So I don't know. Everyone thought the addition of Olu Oluwatimi, the Remington Trophy finalist at center, was going to kind of push them over the top. I was still wait and see mode, but so far, I mean, they've handled the injuries pretty well, and that was the one thing they were praised. They liked coming in how deep they were.
Okay.
So if they were banged up and there were guys injured, they could fill in and do fine. And they've done pretty well. The knock it was the schedule wasn't great early, and they had some easy teams and the like. Maybe some of the guys haven't graded out in certain areas very well in particular games, but I think as a unit, and they're getting close to what they were last year. I think by the end of the year, there's a possibility they are better. But they got to stay healthy. That's obviously the key, especially with how much they rely on the run game.
And what about the defense? Because we know how good it was last year. And everybody understands you lose Hutchinson is huge and Ajabo. But, you look at these guys, and, I mean, Mike Morris has now stepped up to be like the big pass rusher, and Mozzie Smith is just really a force in the interior. So how and I know they're pretty new to being the big guys on defense. How do you think? What kind of projection do you see from those guys? Just what do you think about what their futures could look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Michigan's gotten a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the ball to kind of buy into their roles. Whereas last year, you knew Aiden Hutchinson was going to be a star. Daxton Hill, the safety, kind of screamed NFL potential. His brother played in the league. And then as the year went on, David Ajabo kind of emerged to kind of complement Aiden. That necessarily hasn't been the case this year, but they've gotten guys to kind of find roles, settle into roles, and they've improved as the season's gone on. You mentioned Mike Morris. Some of us thought maybe he'd end up being their top pass rusher. And he has, I think, through 7 games. I mean, he's got 5 sacks, 8. I'm looking at the stats right now, 8 TFLs. He's kind of emerged, but Michigan's done a very good job of rotating a lot of these guys in particular packages and not playing them every down. They've done a good job of substituting, keeping them fresh. So it's really hard to kind of project where these guys go, and it could go in the NFL draft just because they're not playing every down. They're not maybe playing as many reps as they would have in last year's defense. But certainly, I think Mike Morris has the body and the frame, I think, to intrigue a lot of NFL teams. Good dude, good interview. I think he'll interview well with NFL teams. Good head on his shoulders. He's got kind of leadership material to him. So I think that'll scream, it'll intrigue some NFL teams.
How many more years is he at, by the way?
I think he's a junior, so I think he could go after this year.
He can go. He can leave if he wants to. Okay.
Yeah. The issue is a lot of these guys, and that was the storyline coming in this year. A lot of these guys either been riding the bench for a while or hadn't played a ton, hadn't played a starting role. So a lot of these guys are kind of coming into roles where they haven't played much.
Yeah.
Now, Mozzie Smith is one of the exceptions. I mean, he played last year, started a lot. He was on the freaks list coming into the year. And while the stats aren't there, I think Michigan's been real happy about what they've gotten out of him at nose tackle.
Yes.
They say he's double teamed often, almost every game. He commands a lot of attention, and I think that's kind of helped open up some of those edge guys. So they like what they have. Ayabi Anoma, I think he changed his name. Is now Ayabi Oki.
Yeah,
he's the transfer from UT Martin, former 5-star recruit to Alabama. He had a lot of off the field issues, but he's like
really the Ajabo of this year, the mini Ajabo, I should say.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. They brought him in literally midway through camp. It was, I think, a week before the season started. It was this weird thing. It kind of came out of nowhere. He got admitted. He hit the portal. A week later, he was admitted to the university. We find out he's on the team, and this was, I think, like 10 days out before the opener. So we're thinking, what's going on here? And then, he slowly he's added more reps as the time has gone on. They've liked what they've seen out of him. I think he's still learning the defense in some ways, but from a raw skill set perspective, he's got it. I mean, he was a 5-star recruit out of high school for a reason. So if he can convince NFL teams to bypass his issues at Alabama and then Houston, I think it's probably worth, teams will certainly take a look at him.
Do you know if he has another year left of eligibility?
He's a grad student, so he's eligible. He could go if he wanted to.
Okay. He could stay, though? It's possible?
Yeah, I think he would have another year or two.
It might actually be better for him to go.
Yeah,
obviously, it depends what the scouts say. So.
Right, exactly, right. And he went to Houston and he didn't play, and then he transferred out of there. So it's been a long role for him. But yeah, he's intriguing. Michigan's got a couple of safeties. R.J. Moten, he's only, I think, a redshirt sophomore. He might be eligible, but I doubt that he leaves. And then corner DJ Turner, he's an interesting guy. He's been targeted a lot in recent games.
Who's the number one? And I know Sanastriel, who's done an amazing job, moved over from receiver. So, and he does seem to be the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy how quickly they moved him in the spring, and then I remember the spring game toward the end of the spring schedule where they let us in to watch, and he stood out right away. It was amazing how quickly he adjusted. Now, it sounds like he played some DB in high school. So he had kind of under his belt, but he never played it in the college level. So they were I think surprised at how quickly he had basically a starting role coming into the year. So they're happy with him. The one corner I'm impressed with, and I saw it a couple of years ago. If you go back and watch 2020, the year Michigan was really bad, go back and watch that Michigan State film, ironically, and the corners were getting beat nonstop. Jamon Green was one of those guys.
Okay.
The improvement I've seen from him in 2 years, and the coaches will say the same thing. They really like what they've seen on him. He's turned into their number one DB. He's got to a point where teams aren't even targeting him because they're worried he's going to.
So he's their top outside corner.
Yeah, definitely. And he's got a good body. He's long. He's tall. So we talked to him I think last week, and he said even he was talking to Charles Woodson, and Charles Woodson was raving about him, talking him up. So I think Jamon Green's a guy to pay attention to. I think NFL teams will be certainly fascinated, if for anything, his frame and his athletic skill.
And the thing is again, we still have 5 more games left before the end of the regular season. Hopefully we'll talk sometime between Illinois and Ohio State, because if we were able to talk Ohio State week, that's another month of finding out who's going to stick out of this group, because those are 4 more games. And as you said, a lot of these guys, they didn't get a lot of playing time last year. So the more playing time they get, the more they get an opportunity to stick out, make plays and all that other stuff. And that's what they have to do. They got to get better. Obviously, the more better, because just a couple of games ago, things, especially like the Maryland game, was the first game after those cream puff non-conference games where all of a sudden you were like, oh, I thought we were better than this, and then
the defense actually played a legitimate offense,
yes,
like Tolly is out there throwing the football around and actually extending plays and getting outside the pocket. You actually got to tackle, a competent quarterback. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and then after that, that's why the Iowa game was so scary, because it was like, well, okay, we'll see what happens. We know how Iowa, because it's like the Michigan State matchup. It's like you understand why they're heavily favored, but you are wary because you've seen this before. But they were able to get by Iowa. They did that really well, and I anticipate that they'll do that again with Michigan State. But again, you just don't know. As we started out with, especially off the bye, because anything is possible. But I have a lot of, and fans probably feel the same. I have a lot of expectations about what this team can do, but I just can't legitimately say that I'm going to be confident that they can beat Ohio State the same way they beat them last year. I think they're going to have to be more balanced on offense.
Agreed. Yeah. Ohio State's got another year of Michigan's defense on film, so they kind of know how they're going to play. And then I think, you can make the case Ohio State's offense might be better this year than it was last. So
And their
Yeah,
defense is
Michigan
better because it can't be any
yeah,
worse.
yes, yeah, and their defense is better.
Yeah.
And this game's in Columbus too. You gotta
And they
remember
got
that too.
revenge on their mind. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Michigan always has a tough time in Columbus. I mean, last year they had a tough time against Ohio State. Period. And now they got to get over the Columbus Hill.
Yeah.
So that's a totally different beast, and it's a place they haven't played in since 2018. So a lot of these guys on this team and will be playing in this game have never played there before. So this is going to be a different environment for them.
Yeah. And
who knows how the weather's going to be? It could be cold and windy.
True.
You never know.
And that is where the running game helps, no question. It's not like Ohio State
definitely.
doesn't have two really good running backs as well, but they're a passing team. That's just,
right.
And we haven't even seen really their star receiver all year. He's been banged up.
Right.
So, they still have to improve, but they're definitely, they have that edge. I remember Day said it about a month ago that he wanted, and I agree. I understand what he's saying, that he wanted them to not just almost like take for granted the teams who were playing and kind of coast. He wanted them to, put their foot down and strangle these teams to death. And he felt that could make them a more dangerous team once they play, say, Michigan at the end of the season. So, and I see what he's saying, and I definitely do believe that they're going to be a much tougher out this season. And that's why Michigan's got to even, pick up their game overall. But before I let you go, Blake Corum, he's small, but he's so dynamic. He's just a very unique type of running back. What do you? First of all, he's still young. Do you think he hangs around for another year?
I think it's going to depend on how he finishes the season. Because if you remember last year, he got off to a similar, really good start statistically.
That's right. He got banged up.
I can remember.
Yeah.
The 5th or 6th week, he was starting to get in Heisman talk about him and everything else. In the end, then he came down with the high ankle sprain, and he was kind of limited the rest of the way. He had a good game here and there, but he wasn't an every week guy. So I think if he can continue this string out to the end of the season, putting up big numbers and has that big game, because remember Hassan Haskins had a huge game against Ohio State last year.
Yes.
That kind of helped his draft stock. If Blake can put something similar together, I think he's gone, and I don't blame him. I would go too.
Yeah.
I mean, your stock could probably never be higher.
Probably, yeah.
Now, if he starts to peter out, maybe he comes back for another year. But running backs are so tough to gauge because we all know their stock or their lifespan is real long. So we'll see. He's looking great. He put on a few pounds, 12 pounds in the offseason, I think, to try and combat some of the injuries. Because you're right, he is a short guy, short, compact dude. But he takes hits well. He does get yards after contact.
Oh yeah,
he's got great vision. I think that's his real strength. He can read a defensive line, read the defense, and just find those holes and get through them. Now, obviously, it's gonna be a different game at the NFL level, but. Jim Harbaugh has said nothing but great things about him. The running backs coach, Mike Hart, raves about the dude. He's got the leadership traits to him. If he, like I said, if he finishes out the season strong, he'd be a fool, I think, not to go to the NFL.
And I think Michigan will be fine because Donovan Edwards then becomes the number one guy. And because right now they do not really have someone else that they can kind of turn to.
No, but they really like this true freshman, C.J. Stokes.
Okay.
He played at the beginning of the year. He played in the first 3 or 4 games. I think he fumbled in one of them, so they took him out.
All right.
But up until that point, he was running hard. They liked. He had kind of leapfrogged the redshirt freshman from last year, Tabir Dunlap, on the depth chart. But Harbaugh's raved about C.J. Stokes. He was one of his favorite recruits out of the class last year. I think kind of a Donovan Edwards build to him. He can catch balls. He's got some power to him. So I think he's the next guy after Donovan. They just got to fix the fumble issues. And it was just one, but I think when the true freshman fumbles, I think bigger than say if a Donovan or a Blake did.
Well, he could play again when they take on like Rutgers or who else is on their skid. They got another. What do they
Nebraska.
Have? Yeah, there you go. Because the really the last 2 games, those are the really tough ones. Not to say Michigan State ain't going to be tough, but playing this Illinois team, this new confident Illinois team, and when I remember that they were on the schedule, I was glad that was home. I was like, good. I don't want to go to Illinois the way they're playing this year.
No, they've really embraced Brett Bielema. It's almost like a Jim Harbaugh looking team. They like to run the football. They're big up front. In fact, you talk about Blake Corum. I think Illinois statistically has the number one running back in the Big Ten. That Brown kid.
Oh, he's something else. Yes.
So I think that'd be a fun matchup. You're right. Michigan's lucky it's at home in Ann Arbor. It's a game that probably will win, but I certainly wouldn't count Illinois out. Especially
since it's the week before Ohio State.
Right, exactly.
That makes it double dangerous. But like we said, and by then we'll have a good, hopefully a pretty good handle on, well, if they lose this game, would they be okay as far as then being able to beat Ohio State and still go to the postseason? Because being undefeated is great, but look, you're not going to go undefeated anyway unless you win the national championship. So,
right.
It's not really all that necessary. Many teams have won national championships without going undefeated, including Alabama. All right, Aaron. So you've got the Wolverine Confidential podcast. How often are you doing that again?
Yeah, about twice a week. We usually do it early in the week, kind of preview the opponent, and then we do one Sunday night, Monday morning after the game.
Recap. Okay. So When is your next one?
We just had a new one go up this morning.
Okay.
We kind of talked bye week and kind of previewed Michigan State. We'll have one on Thursday morning with our Michigan State writer, kind of a 3-man deal where we're going to combine podcasts. So.
And that's available like Apple,
Spotify, all the big platforms. All their work is at mlive.com/Wolverines as well.
Aaron, appreciate it. And like I said, hopefully we could talk at some point between Illinois and Ohio State, because I'm sure you're going to be getting a little bit more attention for Ohio State week. So we'll have to try to pencil something in as early as possible. But I appreciate your time as always talking Michigan football. It's good to know that it's the last time we spoke. They still haven't lost. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Next time we talk, they'll still remain undefeated, and then it's on to Ohio State.
Yep. Thanks for having me, Greg.
You got it. Thanks, Aaron.